You just said you were de-escalating by telling her to chill out. Why didn't you de-escalate further by saying, I've got your gun, please stop?
Like I said, I didn't want to shoot her. I did not want that to happen.
6 shots, 8 wounds, 1 recording, made by the man who fired them. And for 48 hours he walked free while the woman he killed lay in the morgue and her daughter stood locked outside the house where it happened, unable to even hold her mother's hand as she died. Amanda Williams was 46 years old, owned her own salon, raised 2 children, and had been secretly hiding photographs of her injuries, hospital records, and a text message where Tirrell Edwards admitted in writing that he kicked her in the face. All of it concealed so carefully that even her daughter living under the same roof had no idea any of it existed. So why, with all that evidence in her hands, did Amanda Williams still say yes when he got down on one knee? He made the call himself. It was made just before midnight on October 9, 2023. The address was in the 19700 block of Sunset Drive in Warrensville Heights, Ohio, a suburb sitting just outside Cleveland. And the man who dialed did not sound frantic. He did not sound like a person standing in the wreckage of something that spiraled beyond anything he expected. He told the dispatcher, clearly, plainly, without the fracturing quality of a person who has just witnessed something they did not plan for, that he had just killed his fiancée. Not that something had happened. Not that there had been a terrible accident. Not that he needed help and did not know what to do next. He said he had killed his fiancée, and then he waited. When officers from the Warrensville Heights Police Department arrived and walked into that house, they found exactly what he had described. A 46-year-old woman with multiple gunshot wounds, still in the home she owned, the home she had built, the home that still had her daughter and her 4-year-old granddaughter inside it, upstairs, while what happened in the bedroom below them was still settling into the silence of that house. She was transported to Cleveland Clinic South Point Hospital. She did not survive. Her name was Amanda Sharon Williams. And by the time the sun came up on October 10, 2023, Amanda Williams was gone. Tirrell Edwards, the man who made that call, stood in front of responding officers and said something that would define the next several months of his life, and of her family's life, and of an entire community that was about to learn who Amanda Williams truly was and what had really been happening behind the door of that house on Sunset Drive. He said he had acted in self-defense. How does a man record himself shooting his fiancée 6 times, walk free 48 hours later, and still call it self-defense? If you are new here, welcome to Obsidian Echoes. Please like, share, and subscribe. And because of that claim, because self-defense in Ohio introduces a set of legal complexities that law enforcement cannot immediately dismiss, they held him for 48 hours, reviewed the evidence available to them at that moment, and then they let him walk. He was a free man. Amanda Williams was dead, and the people who loved her were standing outside a police department in the October cold trying to understand how both of those things could exist in the same world at the same time. But this story is not only about what Tirrell Edwards did on October 9, 2023. This is a story about what Amanda Williams had been doing for years before that night. Quietly, methodically, alone, without telling a single person, not her daughter who lived in that same house, not the brother she was closest to in the world, not anyone. Amanda Williams had been building something. She had been collecting evidence of what was being done to her. Photographs, text messages, hospital records, documentation that she stored and hid and held on to. Not necessarily because she knew she would need it one day, but because something deep inside her understood that the truth needed a witness, and she was going to be that witness for herself. Amanda Sharon Williams was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Her parents were George Williams and Jewel Lewis. She was the older of 2 children, and she and her brother Joey came up in a household where family was not just important. Family was the foundation of the entire thing. It was the architecture of who they were. And you can trace the woman Amanda became all the way back to that household, to those values, to the understanding that was planted in her early on that you show up for the people around you. You pour into your community, and you do the work. Amanda graduated from Shaw High School in 1995. That same year, she received her cosmetology license. And that tells you something essential about who she was from the very beginning, because that is not a coincidence. That is a young woman who already knew exactly what she wanted and was not going to wait for someone to give her permission to pursue it. She graduated, and she entered her profession in the same breath. She was 18 years old, and she was already becoming what the people who loved her would one day call her by name, Amanda the Stylist. But she was not going to stop there. She went on to earn her Bachelor of Science from Cleveland State University. And while she was there, she became something else as well. In 2005, Amanda was initiated into Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Incorporated. If you understand what Delta Sigma Theta means, you understand that this is not a social membership. It is a commitment to public service, to scholarship, to a sisterhood that carries real weight and real obligation. It is a community of women who are expected to show up, not just for each other, but for the world around them. Amanda did not join in name only. She was active in her chapter. She was present at events, at service initiatives, at the kind of ongoing work that does not make headlines because it is simply woven into the fabric of how a person moves through their community. Her sorority sisters would later describe her the way nearly everyone who knew Amanda described her: grounded, genuine, present, the kind of person who walked into a room and made it feel like there was more warmth in it than there had been before. By 2023, Amanda had built something she could be genuinely proud of. She was the owner of a La Mode Styles, a salon located in University Heights, just outside Cleveland, that had a devoted clientele who did not just come back because she was skilled, though she absolutely was. They came back because of who she was when they were in her chair. Her website described her as an experienced, trendy, and versatile stylist dedicated to catering to a variety of clientele. From children to senior citizens, she offered the same polite and professional service. She was featured in hair shows and magazines. She offered house calls to clients who were physically unable to come to the salon. She offered on-site services for weddings and events. She had also developed her own product line, Charmaine Diamond Hair Extensions, and a hair and scalp souffle that she used and sold to help her clients maintain healthy hair growth between appointments. This was not a person with a job. This was a person with a vocation, a calling. She had taken a gift she identified in herself at 18 years old, and she had spent nearly 3 decades deepening it, expanding it, turning it into something that touched hundreds of lives. She showed up for everyone around her, but yet kept her battles secret. Even at that, still managed to touch hundreds of lives. Why was she faking the smiles? Why did she hide it? To answer this question, do well to like, share, and subscribe. Across the street from her salon, a counseling center owner named Abel Orrery said he would come down to check on Amanda regularly. He described her as a friend, a neighbor who had made that block in University Heights feel like a place where people knew each other. When she died, a single bouquet of flowers appeared outside the locked door of a La Mode Styles. Just one, but it represented something much larger. The people who had sat in that chair, who had trusted her with something as personal as the way they looked when they walked out into the world, they felt her absence like something had been removed from the air around them. At home, Amanda was a mother. She had 2 adult children. Her daughter Tyler lived with her in the house on Sunset Drive. Her son Tristan Bentley, 21 years old at the time of her death, had enrolled in the United States Air Force Academy. He would later say in a written statement that his mother helped him make that decision, that he learned a million things from her, even when the lessons were not intentional, that she showed him what a sophisticated, accomplished woman looked like in this world. Her brother Joey, her only sibling, was the person she leaned on most outside of her children. He had been raised alongside her by their mother, and he described Amanda as the person who helped shape who he became as a man. She was the one who organized the family reunion every year. She was the one who held the whole thing together. That is not a small thing. The people who hold families together are doing invisible, constant, unacknowledged work, and when they are gone, everything that they were holding starts to come loose, and the people left behind suddenly understand the weight that one person had been quietly carrying all along. Her pastor, Dr. R.A. Vernon, founder and senior pastor of the Word Church in Warrensville Heights, described Amanda as the kind of person who, when she walked into a room, lit it up. He had been doing ministry for a long time, he said. He had seen a lot of people come and go, and he was specific about this. Not everyone does that. Not everyone has that quality. Amanda had it. And the people who passed her salon on their way to work, the sorority sisters who served alongside her, the clients who would spend the next decade thinking about her every time they sat in a different stylist chair, they all confirmed what he said. Something that mattered walked into every room Amanda Williams entered. And when she left, the room knew it. Now, Tirrell Edwards. He was 41 years old. He worked at a hospital. He also supplemented his income by driving for Walmart. He and Amanda had been together since approximately 2017. He moved into her home in 2019. And on the surface, from the outside, from the perspective of anyone looking at their social media, they looked like a couple that had navigated their years together into something solid and real. Anniversary posts, concert seats in Las Vegas, birthday celebrations, premium experiences shared and documented and presented to the world as evidence of a relationship that was working. He proposed to her in front of the people who loved her most. She said yes. The photograph was shared. The congratulations poured in. But the people who were truly close to Amanda had access to a picture that did not match what was online. And the gap between those two pictures had been growing for a long time. The first documented evidence of what was really happening behind the door of that house traces back to November 2020. Amanda was hospitalized. The specifics of that hospitalization, what she was treated for, what the visible evidence of harm on her body looked like, those details were not public knowledge at the time. Because Amanda made sure of that. 2 days after she was discharged from the hospital, she sent Tirrell Edwards a message. And that message described, in Amanda's own words, what she was experiencing every time she looked in the mirror. She wrote that she felt a wave of anger she could not shake. That walking around the way she looked was not merely embarrassing. It was humiliating. She described what he had done to her. She used the word foot. She described the specific act of using a foot to cause that kind of harm, and said it was one of the worst things one person could do to another. She made it plain that the only reason he was not behind bars was because of her own strength, her capacity to hold this quietly and not bring it into the open. Tirrell responded to that message. He wrote that he was glad they were both strong, that he hoped she felt better, and that he was sorry for what he did. He did not deny it. He did not argue with her description of what had happened. He acknowledged it and expressed regret in the flat, practiced way of someone who had said versions of this before. Then, in a follow-up message, he wrote that he wished the love they claimed to have for each other would actually show up every single day. Not demanding, not threatening, just the language of a person who understood that what had just happened needed to be smoothed over, and who had some experience at smoothing things over. Amanda's reply to that second message was 5 words. It will never be the same. And then she did something that almost no one in her life knew she was doing. She saved his response where he said he was sorry for what he did. She saved the photograph she had taken of her injuries. She kept the hospital records from that hospitalization. She gathered all of it, and she hid it. Not in a drawer. Not somewhere Tyler might come across it. She hid it in a way that her own daughter, living in the same house, had no idea it existed. And then she wore a mask in public and let the people who saw her assume it was COVID-related. This was 2020. That assumption was easy for people to make. She used it. She protected the truth about what had happened to her by wrapping it in the most common explanation available that year. And she went back to her salon. And she went back to her clients. And she went back to being the person the room lit up for when she walked in. There is something in this that is almost unbearable to sit with. Amanda Williams was educated. She was accomplished. She was deeply connected to a sorority whose entire purpose included supporting women and promoting safety and service. She had a brother. She had a daughter in her own house. She had sorority sisters and clients and a pastor and a community that, as we would later find out, was ready to march in the street for her. And she did not tell a single one of them. She carried this alone. She documented it alone. She kept the evidence alone. And she wore a mask and went back to work. Why? This is the question that haunts every case that follows this pattern. Why did she stay? Why didn't she tell someone? Why didn't she use those records to press charges? And the answer is not simple, and it is not one answer. Research on domestic violence has shown consistently that the most dangerous period for a victim is when they attempt to leave. The risk of lethal violence increases dramatically at the point of separation. And Amanda, who was educated and intelligent and perceptive, may have understood this about her own situation in ways that the people around her could not have fully grasped from the outside. She was also, by all accounts, someone who processed things privately, who was the strong one, who held other people together. When you have spent a lifetime being the person others lean on, the psychological barrier to becoming someone who needs help is enormous. It is not weakness. It is often the exact opposite. It is the particular exhaustion of a person who has never been allowed to fall apart, who has never had someone else be the one to hold them up. Pastor Vernon would later say he saw a pattern in their relationship. Abuse followed by apology. Apology followed by reconciliation. Reconciliation followed by the next incident. He described it as a cycle, a loop that repeated itself across the full span of their time together. And the documentary evidence Amanda preserved confirmed that this was not a one-time event that she had described in that 2020 message. The pattern had roots that went back further. According to people in Amanda's circle, Tirrell Edwards had previously been taken into custody in connection with a violent incident involving Amanda as far back as 2019, before he even moved into her home. There was also a separate matter involving another woman who reportedly sought a protective order against Tirrell around 2020, citing stalking behavior and threats. He had a history, a documented one, and Amanda had lived inside that history for years. In 2022, Tirrell proposed. By that point, the two were already in couples counseling. Amanda said yes in front of the people who loved her. She accepted the ring, and people who were close to her said she had been privately considering ending the relationship, that she had been thinking about it, that the engagement and the counseling were happening simultaneously, which gives you some sense of the complicated, painful space Amanda was occupying in those months. She was publicly the fiancée of the man who had hurt her. Privately, she was considering the most dangerous decision a woman in her position can make. And quietly, without telling anyone, she kept adding to her collection of evidence. Just in case. October 9, 2023. Amanda had just returned to Warrensville Heights from Columbus, Ohio, where she had been attending a cosmetology convention. She had been doing what she did. Working, building, showing up for her profession with the same consistency she brought to everything in her life. It had been a full day. She came home. Earlier that same day, while she was away, she had not responded to one of Tirrell's text messages right away. That delay, that single gap in response time, became the ignition point for everything that followed. Because for Tirrell Edwards, not getting a response when he expected one was not a small thing. It was not something he could sit with and let pass. The text exchange that followed that delayed response began to escalate in the way that people who had seen the two of them interact would later describe as familiar. Tirrell pressing, Amanda pushing back, the volume of messages increasing, the temperature of the conversation rising. At some point during this escalating exchange, Amanda made a decision. She suspended Tirrell's phone service. She cut it off. This was her account, her plan, her decision to make. And she made it. He got a new number. And he kept sending messages. There is something chilling about that detail. Because what it tells you is that the argument was not something he was willing to let cool. It was not something he was willing to step away from. He did not take the disconnection of his phone service as a signal to stop and think. He found a way around it, and he kept going. The argument that had started in text messages eventually moved off their phones entirely and into the physical space of the home. It moved to the basement, away from where Tyler and Amanda's 4-year-old granddaughter were upstairs. Whether this was a deliberate choice to move the confrontation away from the child, or simply the geography of how the argument escalated, is not clear. But the basement is where it continued. Amanda told Tirrell to leave. He did not leave. He started gathering his belongings, which might have looked, from a certain angle, like compliance. Like he was preparing to go, but he made no real move toward the door. He gathered things, and he stayed. And at some point, he went outside to his car. In the bedroom, on the nightstand, there had been 2 firearms. Both of them his. Before he went outside, he took both guns from the nightstand, and he brought them out to his car. He told investigators later that he did this because Amanda had made a motion toward the drawer where he kept his personal gun, and he was worried she was going to pull it out. He was afraid he would use them on her. He reportedly said to an officer in the back of a police cruiser in the hours after the shooting, "Stop and hold that sentence." He took his guns to his car because he was afraid he would use them on her. His own words. In the back of a police car. Before he knew exactly what kind of trouble those words could become. Then he came back inside. The confrontation moved from the basement to Amanda's bedroom. Tyler could hear her mother and Edwards arguing from upstairs. Amanda picked up an object, described in various reports as a knife that was somewhere in the room, and she told him to get out again. She was in her own home, in her own bedroom. telling a man who had already removed the guns from inside the house to leave. That is where things stood. And then Tirrell Edwards pulled out his phone, and he started recording. He fired 6 times. 6 shots. The gun he used was Amanda's, kept under the mattress of her own bed. He had reached for it while she was, according to prosecution evidence, several feet away near the foot of the bed. Not lunging, not charging, standing at the foot of the bed while he was at the headboard, reaching under the mattress, and firing. 6 shots. 6 shots into the woman who had let him into her home, who had worn his ring, who had been in counseling trying to make something work that had been broken for a long time. 6 shots that produced 8 gunshot wounds in her body, because at least one of those bullets passed through her in a way that created 2 wounds. One of those wounds, as the medical examiner would later testify, would have rendered Amanda completely paralyzed from the neck down, meaning that after a certain point in that sequence of shots, she could not have been holding anything. Not a knife. Not anything. Her hands would have stopped working. The medical examiner confirmed this. The fatal wounds were to her neck and her back. Her back. She was shot in the back. After the last shot, the recording caught silence. And then from downstairs came Tyler's voice, asking what had happened. Tirrell Edwards did not go to Amanda. He did not attempt to help her. He did not call for help in that first moment. He kept Tyler from getting to her mother. When Tyler came up and tried to get through, he blocked her. He told her to call for an ambulance. And then, when Tyler went outside to see if EMS had arrived, he locked the door behind her. Her own mother was in that room, and he locked the door so that Tyler could not get back inside, could not get to Amanda, could not hold her, could not be with her. Tyler Williams, 29 years old, stood outside her mother's house, locked out, while her mother lay inside. She would say later, in a courtroom, with a steadiness that must have cost her everything she had, that she was not able to help her mom, was not able to hold her. Nothing, because he would not let her. That 4-year-old was also in that house. Amanda's granddaughter. She would later tell Tyler's daughter, her friend, who was also 4 years old, that her papa had killed her grandma, and she had been in the room, asleep, when it happened. A 4-year-old child carrying that knowledge in her body before she even had the words to fully understand it. When the officers arrived, Tirrell Edwards explained to them that he had acted in self-defense. Amanda had come at him. She had lunged. She had a knife. He had no choice. He said, "I just shot rapidly. I was scared. She had me so scared with that knife." Because that claim introduced legal complexity, and because law enforcement in Ohio is required to take a self-defense claim seriously before proceeding to charges, they held Tirrell Edwards for 48 hours. They reviewed the evidence they had, and then they released him. Amanda Williams' family broke open. Her mother, Jewel Lewis, stood outside the Warrensville Heights Police Department and spoke to cameras with the particular, shattered composure of a woman trying to remain upright in a moment that is actively destroying her. She said she would spend the rest of her life knowing she was not there for her baby in her final moments. That she must have been terrified. Terrified for her children who were downstairs. That all she needed was closure. Peace. For her children to be able to move forward. She said Amanda did not deserve this. She said it simply. Not performing grief, but reporting it, like someone giving testimony about a wound that goes all the way through. Tyler spoke alongside the family. She kept it direct, the way her mother would have kept it. She said she wanted justice for her mom. She said something had to happen. She said they did not feel safe. She meant that literally. A man who had shot her mother 6 times was walking around free. She was not speaking metaphorically. Joey Lewis stood in front of those cameras and told the press that Amanda had touched a lot of people and that they were going to push for accountability the right way. He told them she had an army behind her. If you watched that press conference, you saw the crowd that had gathered. Her sorority sisters in their red and white. Her clients. Her neighbors. People from her church. The community that Amanda had quietly poured herself into for nearly 30 years. Many of them learning for the first time, standing on that sidewalk, the full weight of what had been happening behind the closed door of the house they had driven past without knowing. Pastor R.A. Vernon stood in front of those cameras and laid out, in plain language, what he had seen. A pattern of abuse followed by apology. Abuse followed by apology. The cycle that Pastor Vernon had seen before. The cycle that researchers and advocates who work with domestic violence survivors recognize immediately. Not a one-time explosion of violence, but a structure. a designed loop that keeps a person inside a relationship through alternating periods of harm and remorse, harm and reconciliation, until the harm finally goes too far. The family retained attorney Ian Friedman, a Marsy's Law advocate. Marsy's Law is an Ohio constitutional amendment that guarantees rights to crime victims, including the right to be heard and the right to be treated with fairness and respect throughout the criminal justice process. The family understood what they were up against. They understood that self-defense claims are not simple to overcome, that the initial release of Tirrell Edwards meant the case needed more than what was in front of investigators in those first 48 hours. And so they assembled everything Amanda had left behind. The photographs from 2020, the text messages, the hospital records, the documentation that Amanda had spent years collecting in silence and hiding from everyone she loved. Her family had not known this existed. Tyler had not known. Joey had not known. They only learned about it after she was gone, which means Amanda had carried this alone for years, had kept it organized and preserved and accessible without ever burdening a single person around her with the knowledge of its existence. 2 weeks after her death, the family held a press conference. They brought everything forward. And attorney Ian Friedman stood in front of those cameras and said that the evidence the police had seen in those first 48 hours was not the full picture. That now they were going to make sure the full picture was painted. That once it was seen, the investigation would proceed as it should, and Amanda and her family would get what they deserved. On November 3, 2023, the Warrensville Heights Police Department released a public statement confirming that evidence had been presented to a Cuyahoga County grand jury. Investigators brought the grand jury everything. The text messages Amanda saved, the photographs she took of her own injuries, the hospital records she preserved, the recording Tirrell himself made on the night he shot her, the statements he made to officers in the hours after the shooting, including the statement captured by a police cruiser camera in which he told an officer sitting in the front seat that he had taken his guns out to the car because he was worried he was going to use them. His own words, captured before he had fully calculated the cost of them. They brought the findings of the medical examiner. They brought the full picture. The grand jury voted to indict. The Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office issued an arrest warrant for Tirrell Edwards. The charges were 1 count of aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, and 1 count of domestic violence tied to the documented pattern of harm within the relationship. That last count mattered, because it meant the prosecution was not just arguing about what happened on October 9th. They were arguing about a pattern that extended back through the years, a pattern that Amanda had documented and preserved, and that was now, finally, part of the official record. Prosecutors made their position clear from the beginning. This was not a panicked moment. This was not a man who found himself in fear and reacted without thinking. This was premeditated. This was an intentional homicide without justification. Authorities called publicly for Tirrell Edwards to surrender. That same day, November 3, 2023, he turned himself in. Bond was set at $1 million. 10 days after Amanda's death, on October 19th, her homegoing service was held at the Word Church in Warrensville Heights. Hundreds came. Sorority sisters in their colors. Clients who had sat in her chair for years. Community members who had known her from church, from the neighborhood, from the salon in University Heights, where she had spent her working life, making people feel beautiful and seen and taken care of. The grief was real, and it was large, and it filled that sanctuary. And even in the middle of it, her family kept moving, kept pushing, because they understood something important. Accountability does not happen on its own. Someone has to push for it. Amanda had spent years pushing for something in silence. Now they were going to push for her, out loud, with everything they had. The response from Amanda's community in those weeks between her death and the indictment was something that deserves its own attention. Because it was not incidental. It was organized, sustained, and ultimately consequential. Delta Sigma Theta sorority's Greater Cleveland Alumni Chapter and the Zeta Omega Chapter of Omega Psi Phi fraternity launched a series of webinars called Love Shouldn't Hurt, directly prompted by Amanda's death. The first webinar was focused on creating safe exit plans for people in violent relationships. The second addressed how to obtain court-ordered protection orders. These were not symbolic gestures. These were practical resources offered to a community that had just been reminded, brutally, of what the absence of those resources can cost. Sorority sister Nanika Slay Jackson stood in front of cameras and said clearly, "The life of my sister matters, and for that we will not stop until we get justice for Amanda." That sentence, and the crowd of people standing behind it, was part of what eventually moved this case forward. Comment your thoughts and let me hear your view, and subscribe so you never miss a case like this one.